Hello and welcome back to another episode and another week here at the State of Scottish Football. We are delighted to be broadcasting to you live across, where are we now? Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitch. We're all over the place. Anywhere you can find us realistically. You'll have the three of us and our colleagues spouting the absolute sense and some nonsense about the beautiful game up here in Scotland, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m, wherever you can find us. My name is Jack Donnelly, and once again, I'm delighted to be joined by two of the finest folks from Edinburgh Napier University and, of course, this esteemed team. I'd usually have Cameron Wanstall with me, but he's managed to get himself out of this one for some reason. I'm not sure. I do take offence to it at this point, but I'm delighted to have these two with me to fill that gap that Cameron leaves. First off, to my left, we have Mr. Sean McGill. Sean, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, I'm used to covering Cameron when he's in a bind. I've done it for a long time now, many a year. As in many a year, I mean like maybe two at a push. So yeah, I'm well versed in that, and I'm looking forward to chatting to you two.
Fantastic. And of course, just below Sean and myself is Mr. Struan Garvey, who's had an absolutely fantastic weekend. It's good to see you, Struan.
It's good to see you again. Yeah, teams did well, and I'm pretty happy with that. I'm always happy to fill in on a Monday as well. I do have a bit of a sore throat today, though, so I apologise for any croakiness in my voice.
I hope it's nothing too serious, I hope.
It's just dry.
Just dry.
Hydrate.
For any context, we had a podcast just before this one.
We did, didn't we?
It was about an hour and a half of talking in that one, so it's
We've spent far too much time with each other today than we're used to, but we'll soldier through. And I tell you what's not going to be dry is the chat that we'll be putting on this show. We're going to be starting, of course, with some transfer gossip. We're rounding down towards the end of the transfer window. That does close at midnight tomorrow night, I believe, or at some point tomorrow anyway.
I think 11 p.m. tomorrow it closes.
It changes every year. I swear it's a different time, a different day every year. But it closes tomorrow in any sense of the word. But a lot of clubs in Scotland are looking to be doing some last-minute business to get some more faces in the door and perhaps some faces out the door. We're going to start with Rangers because, again, the fullback saga at Rangers continues to rage on. 2 points to make. The first being that Rangers have apparently and reportedly kicked back a revised £8 million offer from Everton for Nathan Patterson. So improved from what they offered last week, which was about £5 million, but probably still undervalued, in my opinion. Probably a bit too little than compared to what they'd probably be looking for, Struan.
Yeah, definitely. I think we said it last week when we were talking about it on various shows. It's been one of probably the hottest rumours in recent weeks, the Nathan Patterson story, that he's worth at least triple the initial $5 million bid. And for me, going up to $8 million is it's almost a bit offensive in that sense, that it's just not what he's valued at, not what Rangers want, to be honest. I think easy enough to knock back again. To be honest, I wouldn't even look at offers below 15 million at this point in time for him.
I feel unfortunately for Patterson, because he probably would have put in a fairly decent shift at the weekend in place of the absent James Tavernier had he himself not been isolating due to government guidance. We'll get onto that a little bit later on. But Sean, across the other side of the pitch from Nathan Patterson, Borna Barisic, following the Old Firm, seemed to be quite emotional on the pitch and was seemingly waving to the fans as he was leaving the pitch. Could it potentially have been a wave goodbye? There's been a lot of kind of rumours linking the Croatian away from Ibrox. And if he does go in the next couple of days, how big a loss is he going to be for the champions?
I mean, it's an interesting one. He did seem sort of overly emotional. I know it's obviously a big win for Rangers and that could be a part of it, but it did look a bit like a goodbye, which would be, for me, a bit of a concerning move from a Rangers perspective. I think Calvin Bassey seems to have improved. He gets better game on game, but he's not at the level of Borna Barisic, who himself sort of took time to improve. He was pretty rotten in that first season in Rangers, and then quickly became one of the better players, better defenders, I would say, in the league. And I would just worry about what Rangers would do to react to that. I don't know I don't think Calvin Bassey is their only left-back option heading into what would be a tough season would be particularly smart on the part of the champions. So I'd find that a little bit concerning. But there's always going to be interesting in Barisic when he has the kind of attacking numbers that he does and he puts in the type of delivery. You saw it for the winner on Sunday, and again, that we'll be talking about a lot on this show. he's shown a lot of quality, and it would be a big loss to Rangers. And I just worry about how that squad would cope without another addition should he depart.
I know it is kind of very, very close to the end, of course. So I feel like if they were to let him go and they didn't have someone immediately there to come in and replace him, it could be quite challenging getting through to the January window with just the one kind of out and out left back that you would imagine, especially with League Cup and the league, and of course the Europa League to compete in. So it's a lot of games for Rangers between now and January. Struan, just to touch on your point about Patterson being worth about 15 million, Ian McIntosh doesn't agree. He doesn't think Patterson has done enough thus far to justify the £15 million price tag. Now, I don't know what you think about this, but I feel like I would agree with what Ian's saying, that I don't think his performances on the pitch have done enough to justify being worth 15 million. But that doesn't mean he's not worth 15 million to Rangers. It's what we've seen a lot this summer in terms of players from potentially smaller clubs. In terms of England, you're thinking about the Jack Grealish saga is the perfect talking point, being he's not a £100 million player whatsoever, but he's worth £100 million to Aston Villa. And I'd imagine it's going to be the similar situation here at Rangers as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You look at these other clubs. I think there's somebody like Declan Rice, who West Ham want 100 million for, and you're asking yourself, how can a player be worth that much money? But it's not necessarily what they're going to do and how much they can come to the team. It's what they're worth to their current club. And I think Nathan Patterson is that. He's a young right back. He's already in the Scotland team. I think that's a massive bonus to be in the Scotland team at his age. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people would say he should be Scotland's first choice right back already, ahead of the likes of Stephen O'Donnell. And I don't think many people could complain with that. But for me, he's just got a lot of talent, to be honest. It is one of those transfers as well where you're paying for potential. You're also paying for the here and now, but you're paying for what he can become. What he's shown at his age is already a lot. And you think, he's so young at this point in time, he's only going to get better, you would assume. So it may be 15 million now, but if you sign him for that, in 5-6 years' time, he could be worth far more. I mean, I look at Kieran Tierney. Tierney was a different level. He was absolutely exceptional, going for 25 million, and I don't think anybody could have questioned that. And you look at some other fullback prices across Europe and England, you see the likes of Wan-Bissaka, Kyle Walker, Ben Chilwell, all going for 50 million and stuff like that. So I think in the grand scheme of things, a player with his ability and potential, I mean, he may not achieve it. He may not go on to what we think he can be. But for me, I think he's one of the most talented young players in Scotland.
I think people are right to say that in terms of what we've seen so far from Nathan Patterson's career, that sounds like an awfully high figure. But
completely.
You've got to remember that you're investing in the potential that he holds, and I think especially with Brexit being such a complication for clubs, it made them a lot more difficult for them to accrue players from overseas. I'm talking about Premier League clubs here from down south. That young talent from Scotland are going to become a sort of hotter commodity, I think, for Premier League clubs, because at least in the current political situation, it's a lot easier for them to bring players down from Scotland rather than try and get them in from the EU. So I think that's part of it, and also the fact that Patterson has shown a lot of potential at a very young age, has came into that Rangers squad and performed to such a high level. So people are going to argue over transfer fees. It's a bit sort of arbitrary, but I think that I understand that it's a limited minutes that Nathan Patterson's has played so far, but it's what he's shown in that time and where he could go at such a young age that makes him a sort of at the higher end of prospects in terms of transfer fee in Scotland at the moment.
Absolutely, completely agree with you. We'll move on from Rangers, look over at Celtic, and we had a comment coming in earlier from Terence Pat saying that Celtic need striking options apart from nothing. Griff has to go, Eddie wants to go, and Ayeti is a dud. Well, I'd imagine you'll probably be quite happy to hear that Celtic do have agreed a deal for a new striker, Terence Pat, and we're expecting the announcement in the next couple of days. I'm going to absolutely butcher this pronunciation, so please do bear with me. Georgios Giakoumakis, a Greek striker, 26 years old, coming in from VVV Venlo. And that isn't me stuttering or your stream buffering. That is just what the team is called. It's 3 V's then Venlo over in the Dutch Eredivisie, or recently relegated to the second tier of Dutch football, for 2.5 million. Now, we kind of had to look into this striker just when we were doing a podcast for Energy Sport just earlier today. And this is a guy, Sean, who scored 26 goals in 30 games last season, was the top scorer in the division. I mean, for 2.5 million, you're buying a striker that can get you 20 goals a season. There's pretty good business going on there.
It's mental. I can't quite believe it. I mean, imagine getting the Eredivisie top scorer for under £3 million. It just sounds absolutely mad. And it's not like Venlo are like a high flying team in the Eredivisie. It's not like he was one of the giants and he had good service. He's had to carve opportunities out, and obviously I don't know too much about him, but you can't argue with those numbers. I mean, there's some very sort of impressive players in the Eredivisie. Daniel Malin, who got a move to Borussia Dortmund in the summer. Miron Bodu, who got a move from AZ Alkmaar, Celtic's opponents in the Europa League. He left for Monaco. But these were big money transfers, but this man has outscored them all last season. And just for 2.5 million, when we know Celtic need a striker and striking options, because I agree that Kyogo does look a great player through the middle. How that would affect him there, because I think we saw during the game yesterday that his best position is currently through the middle. So how does a new striker coming in affect that? Can they play two up front in Ange Postecoglou's system? It's all yet to be seen. But I agree with Pat that Celtic need striking options, and if you've got someone who scored 26 goals in a division that's better than the Scottish Premiership and sort of UEFA rankings and all those sorts of things, it seems like a great get, and one that Celtic should definitely be commended for.
And Struan, this guy, I kind of had a little bit. He's over 6 foot tall. He's good in the air. He's a strong physical presence, as well as just being a really good out and out finisher. Of course, 26 goals. You'd have that opinion of yourself just based on the numbers alone. But with him coming in, are you almost expecting at least one other striker to be leaving? I mean, we've been constantly seeing links with Griffiths moving elsewhere in the FL. Odds towards being just the constant talk. Every when you wake up and you wonder which club he's been linked to next. I think most recently it's been Crystal Palace down in England. So with Giakoumakis, coming in, are we potentially just expecting and being ready for one of Celtic strikers leaving in the next couple of days?
Yeah, I think so, and I think it'll be Odsonne Edouard at this point in time. I'm not sure Ajeti or Griffiths are going to get a move, and I think it's time Edouard does move on. I think for everyone at Celtic's benefit, to be honest. I think David Ornstein's reported today that Crystal Palace are going to be moving on to him after they failed to get Eddie Nketiah of Arsenal, so that could potentially speed up quite quickly. Obviously, there's not much time left, and I think that'll be a good deal for Celtic. I don't think Edouard's been up to it recently. His head just doesn't look in it for me, and to get rid of him now rather than leaving on a free next summer, I think is ideal. Equally, Giakoumakis, if that's how it's pronounced, I apologise. He looks a really good player, to be honest. A good amount of money, a good age. He's one of these players who's coming in who's already a good striker. You know, you're not buying potential, as we previously mentioned with Nathan Patterson. You're buying a striker who is already coming into the prime of his career, who's looking really good, and that's exactly what Celtic need, to be honest, because if Kyogo's not getting the goals up front, you don't know if one of those other strikers, Ajeti or Griffiths, are going to provide them.
No, to be fair, even if something happens and it does fall through, it seems as though Postecoglou's going to end up utilising Kyogo Furuhashi through the middle more often than not, especially with the fact that he's targeting another winger, Sean, and Felipe Jota, on the brink of joining on loan from Benfica, with an option to buy for, I think, £7.5 million next summer. 22 years old, coming in, a fairly hot prospect from over in Portugal, got a lot of admirers, and his elder statesman for his country, Bernardo Silva's been a big admirer of him. But with him coming in as an out-and-out winger, and it's been said that he's comfortable across the front three, but you would imagine he would stay out on the left. Is this a sign that we are going to see Kyogo Furuhashi move more centrally for the season to come?
Potentially, and it was the takeaway from me from Postecoglou's post-match comments were that he felt like he perhaps got that one wrong, that he should have played Kyogo Furuhashi through the middle from the start, considering just how good he's been there so far in his Celtic tenure. Jota did play across the front three last season when he was on loan at Rayo Vallecano, and I think that that's I get positive for Celtic that he's versatile and still fairly young, but Ryan Christie obviously ended up on the left yesterday, and then it's particularly, I was a bit unsure of it yesterday. I'm sure we'll talk about that when we get into the game itself, but I think Celtic in most games, obviously, as they should, will be looking to dominate the ball and have a sort of a really big attacking presence in the game, and I really like that midfield three of McGregor, Turnbull and Christie to do that in those games, particularly at Celtic Park. So if you're going to stick with that for those games, then there's no obvious left-hand side option for me, because James Forrest and Leila Bada both seem to be sort of prominent on the right-hand side. So if Jota can do that, and then you have Kyogo, and then one of Abada and Forrest, which might be a dilemma, considering both of them seem to me to be very competent players at this level. Of course, we know that about James Forrest, and Abada started very well indeed. So I think that getting a left winger is smart if you're going to stick with that midfield trio. That excites me a lot as not only a fan of Scottish football, but the Scottish national team as well. Those three getting familiar with each other, playing lots of minutes, I think it's great to see.
No, absolutely. Completely agree with you there. And Struan, just one more before we move on to the big game of the weekend, and the reason that a lot of people will be in the comments just now. Hibs are looking to add a couple more faces to their squad before the deadline does pass, and they're expected to confirm the arrival of a young Middlesbrough defender, Nathan Wood, 19 years of age, coming in for a season-long loan. Now, central defence has been an area of concern for Hibs for a little while at this point, and I just have to, is this going to be enough? A 19-year-old coming up from England, is it going to be enough to kind of satisfy what fans are looking for in terms of a central defender, or are you hoping that potentially someone else can come in as well?
I think I'm definitely hoping for somebody else, to be honest. I don't want to write off Nathan Wood. He looks a really good prospect. He's part of the England under-20 setup. He's done well in the Championship for Middlesbrough. But I feel what Hibs need is not a 19-year-old defender on loan for a season. That doesn't scream stability to me. I know they've had interest in Jamie McCart and Jason Kerr and have had bids knocked back. And I feel this isn't necessarily a plan B or a C. This is sort of a, right, let's just get something quickly before the deadline shuts, because we literally don't have enough options there. I think he could be very good, but at the same time, I think Hibs need to bring in somebody else. Obviously, McGregor is sort of at the end of his career coming to it. Hanlon's at that prime age, and Ryan Porteous is very early 20s as well. So it's a bit of a blend of ages and experience across that defence. You could look at the fullbacks as well. Paul McGinn's a decade, Josh Doig senior. So it's a little bit all over the place. I'd have liked a bit more of a senior figure to come in, but at the end of the day, Nathan Wood could be phenomenal. It's I'm not going to write him off by any means, but I think Hibs still need to bring in another defender on top of Wood, and again, I think another striker is potentially necessary. But at the end of the day, we're now Monday, deadline's tomorrow, 11 p.m. I'm not sure if anything's going to get done yet, but I'm happy with Nathan Wood, to be honest. At the end of the day, it's just to me, it just doesn't feel like enough.
Nothing on any developments on the Jamie McCart deal from. Or is that kind of dead in the water at this point?
I think that's done. They had a £250,000 bid knocked back last week. Cam Davidson's spoken about it as well, and I can understand. I don't think he's worth that little. I think he's worth far more than that. I feel Hibs should have upped their bid if they really wanted to get him. So that one's going to get pushed back. I believe he's also in the last year of his contract, so that's potentially a free signing next year, who many teams could be interested in, depending on how St Johnstone do this season.
Well, we'll just need to keep our eyes peeled at that transfer window before it does slam shut tomorrow. Now, we'll get on to the meat and potatoes of the episode, of course, talking about the Old Firm, the first Old Firm of the new season, and it went the way of Rangers yesterday at 12 p.m. kickoff. It was really, really interesting, really good to see a full stadium of, granted, Rangers fans. I'd imagine if there were some Celtic fans in there as well, it could have potentially put up a bit of a different atmosphere, but just hearing the noise of 50,000 at Ibrox as the teams walked out for the first derby clash of the season, it was just quite entertaining to see, Sean. It was just that kind of, you were kind of up for the game, even though you didn't potentially have a stake in it whatsoever.
Yeah, I think that last season, the games that most obviously missed fans were, of course, the derbies. There wasn't really any Edinburgh derbies, which is a shame, nor Dundee derbies. But I think, of course, for the Old Firms, it was a shame that they didn't have a packed stadium for any of those. So, of course, it would have been much better. I would have much preferred to have seen both sets of fans, and if we could jump back even further, a sizable portion of fans, not just these sort of reduced capacities that have become feature of the most recent Old Firms without restrictions. But still that noise coming out as you were watching the game yesterday was amazing to hear.
Absolutely. And we fast forward 90 minutes, Struan, and of course the game does end. Philip Helander has scored the only goal of the game. Immediate reactions at full time. What were your thoughts? I mean, was it a fair result, 1-0 to Rangers, or do you think Celtic deserved a little bit more than what they ended up with?
I think it was fair on the basis of the second half. I think Rangers did really well. I think especially coming into this game, a lot of people tipped Celtic for it. I thought Celtic did have their chances. Obviously, we'll speak later on about that. The Edward missed chance. Furuhashi had a couple of opportunities as well in the second half. But I just never felt like Celtic were really going to cut Rangers open. I don't think they did it on enough occasions. And almost a professional victory is perhaps a way to describe it from Rangers. They were waiting for their goal. They got it from a corner. They've done it a few times against Celtic in recent memory. So it's just another one of those. They knew their opportunity was going to come, and then they defended well from there on after. It's hard to really say that they didn't deserve it, but equally, Celtic could have gotten something from that game. As I mentioned, Edward's chance just before half-time really could have set the game in a different manner for the second half. But yeah, you can't really complain about a Rangers victory.
And Sean, I suppose I'll come to you for this one. I mean, we had a couple of chats on the day about kind of how Rangers wanted to kind of go out and get a hold of the game and whether it was going to be won or lost in the midfield. I know we were kind of comparing that with a couple of Rangers supporting friends. But do you think it was the midfield that kind of Rangers were able to get control of and really make their own in the second half, and that's why they kind of went on and made the most of their chances and went on to win the game?
I think the midfield played their part. It seemed to me that just a far more aggressive press kind of unnerved Celtic in a sense, knocked them out that rhythm, because they certainly had control of the game in that first half, no doubt about it. I think Callum McGregor was exceptional, really. I really like him at the base of the midfield three. I think that he did that under Brendan Rodgers and displaced Scott Brown controversially at the time. And I think that for a team like Celtic, who are going to dominate the ball in the majority of their domestic fixtures, I think it makes a lot of sense to have a player like Callum McGregor who can just keep the game ticking over and doesn't break counter-attacks with the same sort of bite and intensity that Scott Brown does, but he uses his intelligence and sort of shapes counter-attacks away and calms them down pretty quickly. So, but my concern with that Celtic midfield was that it was a little bit lightweight in a defensive sense. I expected to see both McGregor and Sorrow, and Sorrow's a player who hasn't massively impressed me since he came into the Celtic squad sort of consistently midway through last season. But I thought just the defensive attributes he brings, and then one of Turnbull and Christie, or maybe Christie featuring it wide, something like that, would have made a little bit more sense in a game like this when you know that you're coming up against a very handy midfield three as well. And you saw in that second half that Stephen Davis played a lot more influentially. He was driving that press. There was a couple of times towards the end of the game where he nicked the ball really high up the pitch, and his sort of relentlessness in pushing Rangers forward was key. I thought he was the best player in the Premiership last season, and he was quiet in the first half, but came in and really sort of made a stamp on the second. Glenn Kamara, you saw sort of spots of him being back to the player who was so highly rated last season, after obviously he's had to miss some time out with a suspension that I personally don't agree with, but back in the squad, and I think you saw some of the quality that he has there. But yeah, Rangers just upped their intensity a lot for me. I think that was maybe part of the game plan. You know that Celtic and the form that they've been in were going to come out in this first half and play their brand of football under Postecoglou, try and dominate possession, try and get in behind. And Rangers almost adopted the kind of style and approach that they've used in some of their away European fixtures in the Europa League that have been so successful for Steven Gerrard. And that was kind of their approach in the first half, keep it tight. And then the second half, they came out with a lot more sort of vigour and intensity in their press. And it paid off. Of course, the goal came from the set piece. It's not as if they displaced Celtic and that's really got their goal. But I just think in terms of the flow of the match, if that had continued, Celtic would have grown in confidence even more and eventually would have sort of cut through Rangers. But like we said, they didn't really manage to do that on many occasions. And I think it was a very tight game. It could have gone either way. But I don't think you can argue too much with a Rangers victory either. They took their chance, and it's the first Old Firm goes to them.
No, absolutely. And Stu and Sean mentioned a couple of names there. They mentioned Cal McGregor and Glenn Kamara, Stephen Davis standing out as the kind of main players in the midfield, especially more Davis and Kamara through the second half. But another player that really stood out for me, Leon Balogun at right back, kind of third choice right back after both James Tavernier and Nathan Patterson were ruled out of contention. And a lot of people were potentially a bit concerned that Balogun was going to be playing right back, especially up against someone who's been on such hot form as Kyogo Furuhashi has. But he was really, really solid in his defensive duties on Sunday afternoon, wasn't he?
Yeah, I thought it was absolutely excellent. Obviously, we've seen Furuhashi do damage at striker this season, but as well, he's capable of playing on the left-hand side. I personally think he should have been through the middle, but I thought Leon Balogun was absolutely excellent. Obviously, he's naturally a centre-half, and to play out on the right-hand side, I think he did really well, to be honest. It was one of those selections from a Rangers' point of view. We're looking at the starting 11. Obviously, you've got a backup goalkeeper in McCrory, but Balogun at right-back probably was the weak point in the team. But I thought he fared to the challenge absolutely excellently. A lot of people named him as man of the match as well. I think it's quite hard to pick exactly who would be my man of the match, but Balogun's got to be up there. He just stood up to the test well, and as well, you think about how good Furuhashi's been on the form he's been in. Nobody in Scotland probably wants to face him. Balogun doing it out of position. I think he did a fantastic job.
Now, Sean, we've talked about a couple of players who have stood out for better. Were there any players that stood out for worse for you in this game? Players that potentially didn't hit the mark as well as you were expecting them to in this fixture?
Like I said, it was a pretty closely contested game. I think you'd have to look at Odsonne Edouard because he has been such a revelation in Scottish football. I've loved watching him. I think just the sort of guile and agility that he's shown, and the way that I love his link-up play and his finishing as well. But he missed an absolute sitter. There's no other way to put it in that first half. He should have taken it with his left foot. I think that, and for me as a whole, Celtic didn't sort of show enough attacking intent in the sense that Robin McCrory was it's his first game at Ibrox, his only his second appearance for Rangers, his first Old Firm, and there just didn't seem to be that willingness to test him enough. And I understand that that's Postecoglou style of play and they want to build up, but I just think a few more chances aimed at Rangers goal would have been beneficial to them. But I think David Turnbull was a little bit quiet. He's a player that I've spoken about as rating a lot, and I like seeing him do well because I think it's beneficial to the Scotland squad. I expect him to feature at some point in the game against Denmark on Wednesday with the absence of both John McGinn and Stuart Armstrong. So to see him going into that game with a little bit of form would have been nice from a Scotland perspective.
Yeah.
But I'd be a bit reluctant to criticise too many individuals. I think that, like I said, it was a really, really tight game that could have swung either way. But Postecoglou said it himself that he made a mistake in not putting Kyogo through the middle and instead go with Odsonne Edouard. So for somebody who has been so prolific, is so highly rated, like Struan said, his head's not been in it for a while now, and I think it's best for all parties if he departs Parkhead pretty quickly.
Now, Struan, given how much Rangers were kind of almost overanalyzed coming into this game, I mean, there were a lot of kind of talking points surrounding Rangers. Of course, the COVID situation really wasn't anything they needed, especially ahead of the week that they had, of course, with their European ventures and this game coming up on the Sunday. That was it kind of came at the worst possible moment for them. Of course, there was the kind of weight of the loss to Dundee United that people were still bringing up constantly, and just there seemed to be a lot more positivity surrounding Celtic coming into this game than there was Rangers. So with all that considered, how important was it that Rangers were able to get this win so early on in the season?
Absolutely massive. I think coming into this game, obviously, you said with the COVID situation that Rangers had, the form Celtic were in, it looked as if Celtic were going to get the result. Obviously, as well, from a Rangers point of view, they knew it was going to be at Ibrox. It was only going to be Rangers fans. They needed to impress them because the way they've started the season, you can just imagine the atmosphere. Had Celtic won that game, it would have been just bad, really, just to say the least. And I think it was absolutely massive that they did it, to be honest. And they were missing key figures, of course. The first and second choice goalkeeper, the captain and the manager weren't there. I still think the team was very strong on paper and they performed well. I don't think it was as bad as it was initially thought out to be. I think they're still one of the strongest teams you could put out in Scottish football. But yeah, it was absolutely massive. And it's the old saying of, you can't win a title within the first month of the season, but you can certainly throw it away. And had Rangers lost this game with their current form, you might have said, have they already put a massive dent in their title hopes for this upcoming season? But they didn't. They shown, they're the champions. They went invincible last season. Yeah, they've had a poor start to this season, but they've got the players there. They've got the know-how. I think that was quite important yesterday as well, that the players have been there, done that, and they've got the experience. Quite a few players in that Celtic team had no Old Firm experience whatsoever, and I feel that was definitely one of the major factors.
Sean, we'll kind of head back to Celtic because, I mean, should this be a concern for them that they were kind of unable to do anything against the Rangers defence? I mean, they missed some glaring opportunities, but other than that, they were Rangers were basically in control of that game. They let them have the ball, like you said, and they were able to make the most of their chances up the other end of the pitch. But I know Postecoglou said that he got it wrong and he wished he'd kind of played Kyogo through the middle. But are there positivities for him to be able to take away? I mean, should there be a lot of panic setting in at Celtic, the fact that they weren't able to win the first Old Firm, or is it just a long marathon, not a sprint for them this season?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. The automatic reaction in Scottish football is quite often the overreaction to call everything off and say that it's an absolute disaster or they're the best team ever or whatever. Like, it's often at either end of the spectrum. But I think that sort of sensible football fans who watch that game will know that Celtic are in a much better place than we might have anticipated after that opening day defeat to Hearts. I think that there's a clear brand, a clear identity that Celtic are employing now, and it will be successful. Like Struan said, there's players who still need to bed in, still need to get some big game experience with Celtic, and that will come as well. And the concern for me is the fact that it was another set-piece goal. The fact that
absolutely
something that blighted Neil Lennon's reign and their sort of surrender of 10 in a row last season was their just inability to rectify that set-piece situation. And it's a concern for me that happened against. It was Stephen Welsh, who's young, a very talented defender in my opinion, but he just loses. Philip Lander gets dragged to front post, and the Swede gets round at the back post and nods it home after a brilliant delivery, it has to be said, from Borna Barisic. So that's a little bit concerning, but I think most Celtic fans, from what I've seen online as well, have said that they're not too concerned. They know that Postecoglou is building something. They can see the direction that they're going in, and he'll be learning as well. This is the first time he's been up in a job of this stature, anywhere near it, to be honest. European football as well. So he saw yesterday that he made the mistake not putting Kyogo through the middle, and I reckon next time Celtic and Rangers meet, and it'll be predominantly Celtic fans that time round, which always plays a factor in these games, no matter what Stephen Gerrard says as well, that Kyogo will play through the middle, and that, as you saw in that brief moment that he did, it helped Celtic a lot. So lessons to be learned for Celtic, definitely mistakes to be worked upon, but undoubtedly positives to take, because I didn't expect Celtic to be in the position that they are right now at the start of the season.
No, and those mistakes that are going to be worked on, there's a lot of time for them to be worked on now between Celtic's next game. I just want to ask a kind of more general question to both of you before we move on from this discussion on the Old Firm. And I mean, looking at them now, both of these teams, Celtic and Rangers, are going to have the exact same goal in mind for the remainder of this season, between now and potentially Christmas, you would say. They're both going to want to come back from the international break as best as they possibly can and just hit the league hard as they possibly can, get ahead of the teams ahead of them and try and cement their status at the top of the table while also remaining fairly competitive in Europe. Of course, they've both got European group stage football and the Europa League to look forward to. I'm just wondering which of the two sides, in the kind of fairly small sample size that we've seen from them, although kind of larger than most considering their European ventures as well, can we see this panning out for the most in terms of being able to kind of... I'm just asking for that prediction of kind of seeing who we see kind of kicking on a bit better than the others. And either one of you is free to go here.
Can I sit on the fence and say I think they'll both do very well from this point onwards? I think Celtic, the way they started the season, were very poor. Obviously, going out of the Champions League, losing to Hearts, just a bad start. The team needed so much work. They've made a lot of signings now. We're starting to see Ange ball, and I think Celtic look at a totally different side. Yes, they lost the Old Firm, but as we've just said, there's a lot of positives to take away from a Celtic point of view. I think they're going to bring more players in. Of course, we mentioned Giamakis. He could be a massive help for them if they bring in another defender as well to help them. I know Liam Scales has recently come in. He'll be an interesting one. And I think from here on, Celtic are looking really good. The Europa League group is very difficult. So I don't want to make any predictions on that. I think that's a very tough group. I think Rangers' Europa League group is a bit more easy, I guess would be the way to describe it. I can see them getting through that group. From a Rangers point of view, of course, they haven't started well, but we know what this team's capable of. We know the qualities. It doesn't look like they're going to lose any big players. There's like Morelos, Kent, Glenn Kamara. Looks like all of them are going to be staying. Players will be returning, of course, from COVID. They've made it to the Europa League group stages as well. They've just won the Old Firm. I think there's reasons for them to be really confident too. And both teams have still got some hard fixtures. Neither one of them have played Aberdeen or Hibs. Rangers have still to play Hearts as well on top of that. So it'll be really interesting from this point on, because the way they're both looking, it could be a season that genuinely comes down to the Old Firms that decide the title.
No, I completely agree. I think it will become, but it'll be a very competitive season going forward. But Sean, how about you? Are you kind of have a similar mind that you're expecting both of them to kick on and kind of both do well rather than have one better than the other?
Yeah, in opinion shocker, I think Celtic and Rangers will do well in the Premiership this season. And I don't really want to separate them at this moment in time. I've said before that it's on the State of Scottish Football that it's been basically at no point in my following of Scottish football, apart from sort of very early years, maybe 10, 11, that Celtic and Rangers have been so tight. Like they've been so little between them. I think that, I mean, I was at Rugby Park when Rangers won the title on Helicopter Sunday, and I remember seeing the helicopter fly over Rugby Park. That's the last time really that the Celtic and Rangers were so close, because Celtic had that period of dominance and then Rangers were so far ahead of Celtic last season. So to have a proper neck and neck title race right to the wire is my hope for this season, because if no one else can win the Scottish Premiership, which I'd love to see happen, if Hibs and Hearts can stay up there, that would be amazing. But if no one else can do that, then at least Celtic and Rangers should do it nice. They should play good football while they're doing it, and they should do it in an entertaining way, and they should have a proper battle to make it enjoyable as a neutral for me to watch. So I hope that's the case. Perhaps if you're reading into the Old Firm derby, just to link it back to Sunday, that Rangers might have shown that little bit more know-how, that little bit more sort of nous in terms of how to win these big games, and perhaps that's a mark of champions. But there's still so much to go that I wouldn't call it anyway. Fence sitting there.
Absolutely, and you're more than entitled to. Just catching up on a couple of comments there. There was Criminal TC talking about Troy Deeney being in Glasgow and whether he would end up being signed for one of Celtic or Rangers. But I can confirm 5 minutes ago, Sky Sports did tweet out that he's agreed a deal to join Birmingham City following his release from Watford. So we won't be seeing Troy Deeney turn out for either of the Old Firm clubs this season.
I don't think he'd start for either of them. I don't even think he'd be second choice for either of them either, to be honest.
It wouldn't be. But
if Giamakis comes
absolutely gutted.
Is his boyhood club Birmingham, so I guess it's a good move for him. And he gets to play with Heath Chong now, so
There's always a link. Always a link. Young United
won the Belgian League with Club Brugge last season.
Of course,
yeah, don't care. Scottish football, come on.
Absolutely. And Stuart, I'm going to stick with you because we're going to get on to some other Premiership results at the moment. And Hibernian are sitting top of the league after a 2-0 win over Livingston, while the Lions are propping up everyone else at the foot of the table. There's some really nice football in show from Jack Ross's side as they kind of top the pile heading into the break. And just really nice to see kind of Kevin Nisbet back in amongst the goals again.
Yeah, it was really nice. We saw there was a 4-4-2 as well at the weekend, which we saw a few times last season under Ross, but this is the first time he's properly tried it this year with Scott and Nisbet up top. Great to see Nisbet back amongst the goals. I think that was not a concern for Hibs fans, but it was a little bit worrying, the fact that it had taken a bit of a while to get going with all the transfer speculation that surrounds him. It's a different club every day. It was actually Swansea City today who have been linked, but good to see him back amongst the goals. McGuinness again was absolutely excellent, and as was Jake Doyle-Hayes in that midfield. They've been they've been the two players of the season. I know Martin Boyle has scored constantly and he's always coming up big, but for me the midfield partnership there has been absolutely excellent, and I'd quite like to see that 4-4-2 going forward a little bit more.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Murphy did pick up a slight injury at the weekend as well, so that's potentially going to rule him out. But yeah, it was another good win for Hibs. I mean, it was a bit of a bad game in terms of Livingston and what was going on with some of their players halfway through. So it's obviously we wish them the best and so on. It was a bit overshadowed by that, but yeah, the victory for Hibs and they're back on the top of the table now with an Edinburgh derby to look forward to after the international break.
No, absolutely, and we do wish all those players from Livingston well. It was Bruce Anderson actually suffered it. That's Paul Cotwell saying, Stuart, I'll leave that one to you if you want to remind everyone in the chat who's top of the Scottish Premiership at the moment.
The cabbage.
The cabbage indeed.
The cabbage, absolutely. And it was just to get back to what I was saying there. It was Bruce Anderson, the former Hamilton and Aberdeen striker, ended up suffering a diabetic fit on the pitch, and a couple of other players didn't take were ended up kind of thrown up at half time, and they really weren't dealing with anything too positive. So we do wish them well, and we hope that they make a full recovery over the break, and we can hopefully see the Lions kind of back roaring again following this international break. Sean, just to stick on it, this kind of coming back after the international break straight into an Edinburgh derby, how do you think Hibs are going to be kind of feeling ahead of that? Do you think they'll be feeling positive ahead of it, or are they going to be seeing Hearts start to the season being slightly concerned because it kind of has fallen the way of the Jambos in recent Edinburgh derbies?
Yeah, it has, but if Hibs tend to win, it's usually at Tynecastle. They don't like an Edinburgh derby at Easter Road, but if they are going to pick up a victory, it does seem to be in Gorgie. And the Edinburgh derby went through a phase of being like genuinely terrible, like just awful games of football. Just constant 0-0s, maybe the odd red card to make it slightly interesting, but they were not enjoyable at all. And they've picked up over the last few years, and there's been some entertaining encounters. So that's what I'm hoping for. Jack Ross has questions to answer from Hibs fans, I guess, in big game situations. I think that's they've seen the steady improvement in Jack Ross, and they've been very good, and you've seen it this season, of defeating the teams in the lower half of the table, which was sometimes Hibs undoing in previous seasons. They've dispatched of Ross County, they've dispatched of Livingston pretty easily as well. Got a draw up at Dens Park when they didn't play particularly well either. So this will be a mark, and Hibs fans kind of have gone up and down with Jack Ross because there's these good periods, and then a big game comes up and they perhaps drop off, and it's thinking, is he the right man to take us forward? So it's these sort of games that he has to answer. But it's been a very positive start, of course. They're top of the league, joint top with Hearts, and so top of the table clash in Edinburgh is enjoyable to see. The capital's ruling the roost at the moment, and I'm very much looking forward to that game.
No, as am I. It's going to be a really good game to come back to after the international break. And we'll take a quick look at Hearts today. They had another solid performance again away at Robbie Nielsen's old stomping ground up at Tannadice, beating Dundee United 2-0, goals from Liam Boyce and Armand Nandwile. I suppose the biggest news coming out from Hearts today, Sean, is that they have officially become the largest fan-owned club in Britain. Anne Budge has officially transferred her majority shares over to the Foundation of Hearts, meaning that Heart of Midlothian are completely fan-owned at the moment. And it's just really good to see after their kind of struggles towards the earlier 2010s, after a few years kind of doubt and worry, we're at this point with Hearts.
Yeah, and being from Midlothian, there's obviously a massive Hearts contingent. Loads of my pals are Jambos. And I remember that time, and as much as you want to, like, you poke fun in football and it happens, and I still do it now, but it was like a distressing time for Hearts fans. Obviously, when your club's in jeopardy and you're hearing news reports that there might not be a Heart of Midlothian to support, what do you do if your football club disappears? Like how do you reconcile with that? It's a scary prospect, and to think that in a relatively short period of time they've gone from sort of the brink of non-existence to well, they're just up from the Championship, but they're a competent Premiership club, and now they're completely under the ownership of fans. I think it's a great story, and Anne Budge has had our doubters, had our critics as well for decisions made, and the sort of Craig Levein saga, in which a lot of Hearts fans thought that his employment was a little bit prolonged, I guess is a nice way to put it. But she saved that club when they needed it most, as did thousands and thousands of Hearts fans who poured their money into that football club. They had like a week to raise £2 million, and it just appeared. They did it, and that the numbers kept changing, and they needed to keep meeting these targets. And Hearts fans did it, and Budge did it, and it's credit to all them that they've got into the position where they are today as the UK's largest fan-owned football club. It's something that I'm sure all of us would like to see for our football clubs, that fans are the decision makers, fans have their stake, so we can't see any of the horrible power grabs that we've seen across Europe over the last few months or so. So it's the way forward, and credit to everyone involved in this changeover. And I hope it brings a successful period, because a strong Hearts, a strong Hibs, a strong Aberdeen, only good for Scottish football.
Completely agree with you there, mate. And it really does kind of give extra precedence to the quote that football is nothing without the fans, and that's kind of clear as day in this situation. Struan, on the pitch this season, Hearts they've only dropped points once. They're undefeated so far in the Premiership. I mean, could they have expected this start to the season? I mean, kind of home to Celtic on the opening day, there was a fair bit of kind of doom and gloom surrounding that fixture, but they went out and got the win, and they ended up annoyed almost that they ended up dropping points against Aberdeen. They really feel like they could have got something more out of the game. So really, really positive sign start to the season. But I mean, coming up from the Championship, was it even expected that this could have ended up being the outcome for them thus far?
I think it's quite a unique situation, because obviously when teams do come up from lower divisions, you don't expect them to hit the ground running necessarily. But for a team like Hearts, who are absolutely massive, you'd argue possibly the third biggest club in Scotland, fourth, wherever have you, the one of the biggest regardless, you'd expect them to be near the top. And I feel the results have been absolutely excellent, but it's the opposition as well who they've beaten. As you said, a point against Aberdeen. They've beaten St Mirren, who have been a bit of a bogey team for Hearts. Beating Celtic on the opening day is absolutely excellent. I mean, if you put it in contrast to Hibs, Hibs and Hearts are on the same points. It's just goal difference that Hibs have. Hibs have played teams lower in the league compared to what Hearts have. So you'd say, if they can win the Edinburgh Derby, Hearts have got a much better run of fixtures coming up than Hibs. And Hibs are still to play both Old Firm teams. Hearts have only yet to play Rangers. So things are looking really positive. On the field. Suter has been absolutely excellent. We've seen Craig Gordon now. He's Scotland's number one. That's absolutely massive, to be honest. Just to be number one, we all know he's capable of that as well. Boyce has been absolutely fantastic, and some interesting new signings. Ben Ngimi has been a breath of fresh air. He's been absolutely fantastic. Ben Woodburn looks a really exciting talent as well. We'll see how he does. Is it Cammy Devlin as well, coming from Australia, Devlin, yeah. Who the social media buzz around him has been absolutely excellent as well. So I think it's a really positive time for Hearts, and I'm very envious of the fans who get to say that they own their club. I've seen quite a few people now on their social media and their Twitter bios have just put owner of Heart of Midlothian FC, and I'm just really jealous of something like that. Can you imagine being able to say that you own your football club, or you part own your football club? I think that's absolutely fantastic. But from Hearts' point of view, they've been excellent at the start of the season.
On Craig Gordon quickly, Jack, that he pulled up some great saves on Saturday, but particularly that one from Charlie Mulgrew's free kick, I think it deserves a lot of credit. And like Struan said, it just reinforces. Some folk might be saying, we're going to give one of the young guys a chance, Alan Clark's been in good form for St Johnstone in Europe and all that sort of stuff. But to me, there's absolutely no doubt about it. Craig Gordon's got to be Scotland's number one for this triple header.
I couldn't agree more, to be honest, Sean. I mean, I said it coming in, and fair play, Xander Clark and Liam Kelly, they've done enough to warrant an inclusion in this squad, and I don't think you can take that away from them in any way, shape or form, because they have played their way in and they've been good. They've been really good for Motherwell and St Johnstone respectively. But on the face of it, Craig Gordon is head and shoulders above them at the moment. He is absolutely fantastic. I mean, we said a lot last season amongst ourselves and with our Hearts friend Jamie McIntosh. Gordon's got at least one worldly of a save in him every single game, and I feel like that's been upped now that he's back playing Premiership football. He's having to do it more regularly, and he's coping with it really, really well. And I feel like there's no doubt in my mind that he should be starting in goal for Scotland come the Denmark game Wednesday night and into the other two fixtures as well. And I'm really excited to see him pull on the Scotland jersey once again. Let's move up to Pittodrie. Let's go to Aberdeen 1, Ross County 1. From one really good goalkeeper to another not so good goalkeeper, Sean. County were minutes away from their first Premiership win of the season in what's been a season that a lot of people are expecting County to get very little out of.
And
hoping. It would have been and hoping, yes, for many, many different circumstances, especially Muller was here. But they just couldn't hold on for all 3 points, or quite literally, Ross Laidlaw couldn't hold on to a fairly slow roller of a shot from Johnny Hayes, and he pushed it into the path of Christian Ramirez, who broke what's been a little mini goal drought for 6 games he's not scored in, and got his first and 6 to level things for the Dons. But just an absolute shocker from Ross Laidlaw.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd said to Ross County before a point at Pittodrie, you would have said that's pretty decent considering where you expect both teams to be come the end of the season. But it was so close to being at that first 3 points, like you said, and circumstances that they lost those will be massively disappointing to everyone up in Dingwall, because, like you said, Johnny Hayes cuts inside for that counter and just sort of curls a shot, like it trundles on the ground towards Ross Laidlaw, and it seems like he'll hold it pretty easily, but instead kind of slips underneath him. He tries to grasp it, it doesn't pay off, and then it's Christian Ramirez who comes sliding in to grab the equaliser. And Rosledale was at fault for a couple of the goals against Rangers last Sunday. So I think that it'll be a little bit of a concern after he had an upturn in form last season, because he was ridiculed at Hibs for sort of a few mistakes, quite high-profile mistakes. Then he didn't do too much at Ross County in his opening spell, looked to have upped his game last season. Now it seems that these mistakes are creeping back in. And I said it to you guys earlier on that I know just how sort of critical and it can be when you have an underperforming goalkeeper when you're at that end of the table. It really struggled in the last couple of years, and particularly last season with Danny Rogers and Colin Doyle. When the defence have no faith in the goalkeeper, it leads to all sort of defensive mishaps and miscued clearances and like miscommunications. When one's like you think the keeper's going to kick the ball, like collect the ball, and then defender tries to nick it, and then it's a penalty to St Mirren in the Scottish Cup quarter final. Not anything specific or that. So I think that if a deal arises over the next day or so for a goalkeeper, I imagine that Malcolm Mackay might be keen to get someone in, because you don't want to have that lack of faith in your supposed number one. I have lost your audio, Jack. I don't know if you've muted yourself again.
I have indeed. Yes, that was that.
Sometimes you do that because you like to keep us on your toes. It's a little routine you do, so I'm glad you're back to turn your mic on.
Yeah, it's just I don't want to have any background noise kind of coming in if you were making a really good point, as you tend to do a lot on this show. So just muting my mic when I'm not speaking is just the common courtesy I try to put out amongst friends, of course. So I appreciate you keeping me right, but no, I completely agree. I think if your starting number one's faltering, then it really can be a team's undoing. And I mean, you kind of had the shades of that when you watched Zach Hemming for the Inverness Cali Thistle goal for their 1-0 win over Kilmarnock at the weekend. And I know you'll not take too kindly to me bringing that back up, but I'm going to do it anyway, I'm afraid.
It's a story I have seen play out before. I've seen this movie, Jack. I've seen this movie already. Because the visitors, Cali, scored early with a shot from Michael Garden, former Killie man Michael Garden, who scores against us all the time. He kind of sends a shot high from a tight angle, and I'll do my baby reenacting that Hemming sticks his hands up like that, and it just kind of goes right through there.
Lovely. To the hole in the hands.
It was kind of hole in the hands, quite high. He should have done a lot better, the all-known Middlesbrough keeper. And like I said, I am still scarred from defensive mishaps. I thought Killie had great keepers for a very long time, and it's kind of come crashing down. And Hemming and Sam Walker, other ones, seem to be sort of a step above that. And I'm not saying that Hemming's rubbish because he made one mistake. I just get a little bit scared when I see a mistake of that ilk, I guess. So, and then I think it's going to be a feature of Kilmarnock's championship season as the favourites, as the team with the biggest budget, as the team who just got relegated, that they will be, if a team takes the lead, particularly at Rugby Park, you're going to have to deal with banks of the defenders and midfielders and just try and break that down, which Kilmarnock have not been good at for a very long time. So that's something they're going to have to combat a lot this season. I don't think it's terminal in the title challenge. We're 4 games in. A very impressive start to the league from Inverness Cali Thistle. I don't know if they can keep winning 1-0 every week. I feel like that's got to come to an end at some point. But a massively impressive start from Cali and Billy Dodds, who seemed like a weird appointment to me. I didn't really understand where that one came from, but credit to him, he's had a very positive start up in the Highlands, and they'll take massive confidence from that victory because, like I said, Kilmarnock also had a 100% record. They're the favourites for this league at Rugby Park, and they came and got a result. So, things to work on for Kilmarnock. I'd like to see them get some form of attacking midfielder in the next couple of days. Don't know if it'll happen. It seems to be a lot of striker talk, and Inverness continue their 100% record without conceding a goal. Let's see how long it can last. Hopefully not long.
Well, I mean, yeah. Hopefully not too long, but I had them pegged for, I think, a third place finish, I said, for Cali, I think, at the start of the season, behind Because I had them basically where a lot of people had Partick, because I had
yeah.
Partick finishing quite low down in comparison to a lot of
Who
others.
did we all have second, Jack, and how are they getting on?
Well, I had them first. I had
You had them first because you're petty.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. That's the same reason you've got your 9th, but that's probably more realistic than me having Kelly second. Dunfermline have not been off to a good start, but I mean, I'm not too surprised to see them losing 3-0 at the weekend to Arbroath, because I really like Arbroath. I just really like what Dick Campbell's been able to do. Of course, the only part-time team left in the top 2 divisions in Scotland, and they've been punched above their weight for a number of seasons at this point, and they continue to do so. Currently sitting 4th, just 2 points behind both Partick and Kilmarnock. And yeah, 3 goals. Michael McKenna again getting off to a really good start to the season, and David Gold scoring in between those 2 efforts. And another John Newell assist for McKenna. He's been off to a brilliant start to life in the Championship, coming in on loan from Livingston. I've got no complaints about A United this weekend, other than we didn't play because of a batch of COVID cases at the club.
I'd be happy with that.
To be fair, give us some stuff to work
on.
Not
with the COVID cases, I should say. That sounded.
That's more to be fair, it's more of a concern for Wraith Rovers, because by the time that they next play a game, it'll be about 3 weeks since they last kicked a ball in a competitive environment. So slightly concerning for them, especially considering they're still looking for their first win of the season as well. So a lot of interesting times in the Championship. We'll round off a couple of the other results we've not had a chance to talk about yet. In League One, big clash at the top of the table between Falkirk and Queen's Park ended up with Queen's running out 1-0 winners. And Montrose were taken off of the top as a result of their 2-1 home loss to Dumbarton. And Kelty Hearts, again, they continue to roll their way through that division, as Aaron Athletic also picked up another win to keep them second. We're running out of time, but I did want to address a couple of updates with the Scotland squad ahead of our triple header against Denmark, Moldova, and Austria in the next week or so. We are going to be 5 players down for the Denmark game. Both John McGinn and Nathan Patterson are set to be missing due to government guidance in terms of coronavirus pandemic and everything like that, while James Forrest, Greg Taylor and Stuart Armstrong are set to miss the 3 games completely through injury. Struan, are these big losses?
Yes. Nathan Patterson is a big loss at right back, because I'd have liked to have seen him given an opportunity. James Forrest is a big loss because he's an option in at right wing back and just a good option to have off the bench. John McGinn is one of our better players. However, Greg Taylor is a 3rd choice left back, backup left back. He's not going to play. Robertson's our captain. Tierney's one of our best players. And Stuart Armstrong, I'm not that fussed about him missing out on a place. I like Stuart Armstrong as a player. I just don't think he fits the Scottish system. So I think 3 of the losses are bad. 2 of the losses are not that big of a deal. I think what's annoying me more is the fact that no one else is getting a call up, that we're not bringing anyone in. I think it's the perfect opportunity to just give Tony Ralston, give Calvin Ramsey a shot in the team. I don't even know if Stephen O'Donnell is going to be playing either. I don't think he played at the weekend for Motherwell. So
he was training today and had a big smile on his face and was running with the rest of the squad. So I'm hopeful.
He knows he'll be back in the team. That we'll have at least 1 right back then. But yeah, I mean, we've obviously lost McTominay as well, just through surgery before the squad was even announced. So a couple of midfield losses there and defensive losses. So it's just been nice to see somebody else get called up. But overall, I'm not too fussed on that. As I said, I feel we've got enough in the team to do what we want to do. Obviously, as well, Denmark, I think even with a fully fit team, we'd be up against them. They're that good. So I'm not worried, is what I should say.
Sean, what do you reckon about potentially having a couple of players brought in instead of those missing out? Clark said he's not going to bring anyone else into the squad. And I know a lot of people, considering the fact that both Armstrong, Forrest and McGinn are set to be out of Denmark, a lot of people were calling for a certain Scotsman over in Canada to be brought into the squad. And we all kind of agreed that it would have potentially been a good moment for Gold to be brought into a Scotland squad when the squad was first announced last week. But what are your thoughts just now? Are we happy sticking with David Turnbull in the 10 for Denmark, or would you potentially have liked to see Gold get an emergency call up to the squad?
I don't know about the logistics of that, because of short notice coming from, I was going to say America. They are technically plays in the American League.
MLS, yeah.
I am aware that Vancouver's in Canada. nobody can trip me up on that just yet. But I don't know how that would work logistically in terms of coronavirus. I know that travel's obviously pretty tricky at the moment, and I guess that speaks for all players. I don't know if you've got to have a certain time before you can get in the squad. There was obviously late calls before, so I feel like players, at least Scotland-based players, should be able to have been brought in. So I kind of discount Gold on that basis, and maybe there's players who would have liked to have seen brought in. It's more a question of depth that I'm a bit concerned about. I would like another right back in for depth, like Struan said. Ramsey or Ralston seems to be sensible options to me. Maybe even Ralston, because Ramsey's away with the 21s is the current plan. Ralston's not doing anything, as I understand, so that would make sense. But yeah, I think that it's good that David Turnbull's sort of grown into a natural successor to John McGinn. Successor is really not the right word. A replacement, I guess, a backup option at this moment in time, considering just how well John McGinn plays for Scotland. So I kind of feel all right with the squad at this moment in time, but they're really tough games, and they're going to be a slog, I think, and our nerves are going to be shredded. So I'm looking forward to getting to Hampden on Saturday, and I'm looking forward to talking about the game against Denmark even more on tomorrow's State of Scottish Football.
No, absolutely. And we are going to have full coverage of that Scotland game this Wednesday, coming doing a pre-match, a halftime update, and a post-match as well. And we don't exactly know who's going to be on that, but I think I'm going to be on that. Struan, I think you're jumping on that with me.
I'll be there.
I'll be there. And we'll have someone else on. Sean's not. We're not going to have Mr. McGill joining us, unfortunately, but
was tonight that bad? Yeah. You just don't want to show up with us again?
Based on the last hour, Struan, that's it exactly.
I was planning it, and then speaking to you to my social batteries out the window, so I'm going to have to take some time to recover on that front.
We can completely understand. We'll sure you get you back on a show in the near future. But that is all the time we've got for this episode of the State of Scottish Football. Thank you very much for joining us, having your comments, and it's been fantastic as always. Make sure you're back same time, same place tomorrow. Not Wednesday. We're going to be doing things a bit differently. We'll update you with that on tomorrow's show. But we're going to be looking forward to the rest of the season, the rest of the Scotland games and beyond. Massive thank you to Sean McGill and Struan Garvey for joining me this evening. I've been Jack Donnelly. This has been the State of Scottish Football on a State of Mind. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you soon.